Hello guys, it's Dr. Spears here, and it is January, and you're probably wondering if you're a pre-med and you're in the process of applying to medical school, one of the biggest concerns and worries that you have right now is the MCAT. So I'm going to break down what you guys need to know about preparing for the MCAT in the month of January, so you're on the best footed moving forward so that you can excel when you actually sit for the real MCAT. So one thing that I want you guys to do if you're applying to medical school this year is you need to take a diagnostic MCAT ASAP. So this isn't a full-length real MCAT. It's a diagnostic to kind of see where do you stand with the material. What do you know? What don't you know? And what does a test writer actually demand of you so that you can be properly prepared to begin your study plan and schedule for the actual MCAT? Because at the end of the day, you want to take the MCAT in March or April of the year that you're actually applying to medical school. And so we look at the calendar, we're already running out of time. And why do I want to advise you to take it in March or April? Because it's going to take approximately 35 days for your MCAT score report to be released so you can actually see how you did on the MCAT. And so we're going to think about this long term, we're going to be strategic about that. Imagine you take the MCAT in April. So then you only get your score back in mid-May, early June, depending on when you take it in April. Now you look at that, and one of the concerns that we'll have for you is you really want to know what type of MCAT score you have before you start applying to medical schools. And as my advisor or one of the deans and a provost from the University of Chicago Medical School said is the MCAT's a test you want to take once and only once. So we do not want to be in a situation where we're sitting for the MCAT in March and April and we're really not sure about how we're going to do in our performance, but we're going to just take it because somebody said, I need to take this MCAT in March and April and I'm going to just see what happens. Absolutely do not want to do that, because what happens, you take that exam and then mid-May, early June comes back and you have a bad score. Horrible. We don't want that for you. So that means you would obviously have to retake the MCAT. And then now you're going to already kind of be somewhat behind in the application process, because again, it's going to be 35 days of from when you actually sit for the MCAT until you get your score back. And if you didn't do well on it, that means you're going to need time to restudy and relearn the material, because it's highly unlikely that once you take the MCAT, you're going to continue to study in case you have to retake the MCAT. So we don't want that to happen. So that means you're going to probably need about 3, 4, 5 weeks of MCAT prep before you even take it. And now if we just do the math and the calendar, we're pushing that out. We're now like 2 months out, and now you're not going to really have a score back for that's going to be competitive for medical school until really like August or September. Now that's not the end of the world, because you can actually go ahead and apply for that one score and note that there's going to be a pending score, but I would probably want to wait until I have that new score before I decide to move forward with my application, just because you might get pushed to the side because you have a low MCAT score. Obviously, you have to retake the MCAT. And so that's why we want to take the MCAT early, to give ourselves time to do that. But more importantly, we want to have this diagnostic. And a lot of students, they get concerned and worried that, oh, I haven't studied for the MCAT. I don't know what's going to be on it. I'm really worried. I don't want to be demoralized by seeing a very bad performance on a diagnostic. Do not worry about that. We need to know what your baseline is. So there's no point in going ahead and studying and try to artificially boost your score. That's not the name of the game, and that's not what we're trying to do here. And the reason I say that is because then you're going to actually start using a solid, proven process to actually prepare and study for the MCAT. And your score is going to tell you how much time do you need to allot to MCAT prep. If you guys do horribly, you might need 3 months of MCAT prep. And if you're kind of right there, you might just need 6 to 8 weeks of MCAT prep, just depending on where things are and where you've scored on your diagnostic and how comfortable you are with the material. So that's why we need to take this diagnostic to begin. You're not really concerned about our actual score. We want to have a baseline. And the reason we have this baseline then is because as you're studying, whether it's going to be 3 months, whether it's 6 weeks or so, you need to know whether you're making progress and actually improving on your MCAT performance. And the only way you're going to know about that is if you have a baseline, a point of reference. Because imagine, did not take a diagnostic MCAT. You go take one a couple weeks before your exam, and you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I scored like this. I thought I would be doing better, and you're not where you need to be. And that's going to be a concern for you. But then if we look at, oh, your baseline, that you, if you would have taken a baseline, we would have said, wow, you're actually making a huge improvement on that. So that means continue doing what you're doing because it's actually working for you and you're doing better than what we thought based on your baseline. Or you could have the other point where somebody is studying, doing all of this time, but they never took a diagnostic and they had their score and they think they're doing everything right. And it's actually like, no, you have not improved. Your score actually kind of went down than what it was. So you need to revamp and totally overhaul your approach to your MCAT prep. And you won't know that unless you have that diagnostic MCAT where you can compare your score to at the beginning throughout how your process is going as you continue to study and take practice exams. And then more importantly, not only do you take a practice exam for the MCAT, but you need to review all the questions, go over them, understand why one answer was correct, why the other answers were incorrect, and what the test maker wanted you to get out of this question. And you need to continually do that because you need to start thinking like a test writer, the MCAT writer, and so that when it comes to test day, you're not shocked, overwhelmed by things because it's something that you've been doing for so long, so many weeks, even months of MCAT prep, where it's not going to really surprise you. Yes, there are going to be things that you haven't seen before, but because you're thinking like a test writer, you can kind of work your way through the problems, think critically, and work your way to get to the correct answer. Process elimination, knowing things that absolutely are incorrect, know what are distractors that are put there in the answer choices so that you can move forward in this process of getting into medical school. Because if we're being strategic about this, we really don't have a lot of time. There's so much that goes into applying to medical school. And here's one thing that you also need to know about the MCAT. The number one factor that goes into any medical school admissions decision is going to be your MCAT score. So that's why this is a test you want to take once and only sit for when you're most prepared to excel and do well on it, because you don't want to have retakes, because that's going to just put you lower than another applicant who took the MCAT once and has a solid top score. Whereas, yeah, you might have bombed or did very poorly on your first attempt, but then you also took a second one, you did a lot better. But to an AdCom, we'll be like, okay, well, you took the test twice. I would hope that you improve and would do better on the second time around. And so it's really not giving yourself advantage by doing that. So do not feel pressured to take the MCAT just because somebody told you to. And although I'm advocating for a March or April MCAT test date, you have 2 to 3 months right now to start preparing for that, so it's not a shock or surprise to you where you're cramming and just trying to get through all the material last minute to take that MCAT. So even if March or April comes around and you're not prepared for it, do not go and sit for the MCAT. You do not want to do that. I would actually rather see somebody apply to medical school slightly later with a higher MCAT score than applying early or on time with a lower or suboptimal MCAT score. So you need to keep that in mind. You need to kind of weigh the pros and cons of it all. But it really begins with taking that diagnostic MCAT as soon as possible and then using that to kind of gauge how much time do I need to prepare for the MCAT so that you're not rushing. You know you're going to have other obligations with school, academics, extracurriculars, but at the end of the day, there's 2 things you need to do. You need to protect your GPA at all costs. I don't want to see your GPA just plummet because you're studying for the MCAT. But at the same time, the second thing you need to do, you need to excel on the MCAT and do whatever it takes to make sure that you have a strong competitive score so that you can get into medical school. So that's some of the things I wanted to teach with you guys, go over for you, and don't be afraid of the MCAT. It's really just rehashing, going over materials that you learned throughout your pre-med years, but then how to apply it and think critically with that material. So again, diagnostic MCAT, first thing we're going to do, not really worried about the score, how we do on it, and then we're going to use that as like a litmus test or just kind of gauging how much time we're going to need to study for our MCAT prep, and then we're going to pick our target MCAT test date, either March or April ideally, and then work back from there and say, okay, how much time do I need to study each week to make sure that I'm covering all the material that's required for me to excel in the MCAT, and constantly take practice MCATs throughout your MCAT prep period to make sure that you're improving, learning the material, and getting comfortable with answering MCAT style questions, because they're different from what you see in your normal coursework. And if you follow this process, you should do well in the MCAT, and do not be afraid to reach out to me. You can find me at drpremed.com if any questions, concerns, or you just need more insight or advice on how you can perform adequately and make the most of your limited time so that you can excel on your MCAT. Thank you.